Jensen here. Today we're going to make some blueberry discard or sourdough discard blueberry muffins, and then we're going to do kind of two Italian melts, one like a pizza and one like a pesto-y deliciousness. I'm excited for the pesto. So let's start with our blueberry muffins. So we're going to first start by adding in our wet ingredients to our bowl. So I have 1 stick of butter melted. So we're going to put that in there. And there we go, with a 1/2 cup of whole milk. We don't need these guys. And then we're gonna add in 1 cup of sourdough discard, which is perfect because I need to feed my big guy. I need to feed them both because I didn't feed the one I used for my bread yesterday. So we're gonna add 1 cup of sourdough discard. I'm gonna give it a little stir. Okay. There we go. Whoop, right up to the top. And we're going to mix that right in here with our milk and our butter. Use my spatula to scrape any of it out. This is a great recipe to use if you need to discard. It makes about 12 really delicious blueberry muffins. Perfect. So we've got our sourdough, our milk, and our butter, and I'm just gonna give it a quick little stir. Perfect. And we're gonna add in 2 eggs. I was very excited. I got eggs today, so that was a win. I feel like it's like going to the store. You never know whether you're gonna have eggs or not. You just look and you're like, are they in the carton? Are they on the shelves? So we have our 2 eggs, and I'm gonna give this a quick little whisk. Not very long. We don't want to over mix them. Now I'm going to add in a teaspoon of almond extract. You could use vanilla if you wanted, but I feel like the almond just has a nice little pop. So a teaspoon of almond extract. And then we're gonna add in a tablespoon of baking powder and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So you need a nice big tablespoon of baking powder. Not baking soda. If you do baking soda, your muffins will balloon up, it'll be giant, and they'll have a bitter taste. So 1 tablespoon of baking powder and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Here we go. We're gonna give this a nice mix because we wanna make sure that the baking powder is completely incorporated into the liquid. But one key thing when making like biscuits or muffins and you use butter, you don't want to overbeat your mix because that leads to a stiff and tough dough, and you want a nice light and flaky one. We're going to add in 1 cup of granulated sugar. With 2 cups of flour. And I'm using just all-purpose flour. So 1, 2. And we're gonna give these a quick mix until they're just combined. You don't wanna overbeat them again because that will lead to a really stiff muffin. Okay. So they're just barely combined. I'm going to use a spatula to do the rest because, again, I don't want to over mix. Okay. Now we're just going to use a little spatula here, and I'm just going to scoop around the sides, make sure we don't have any wet pockets or dry pockets in our batter. Beautiful. It's a nice, lovely, and thick batter. That is because we're using butter. The butter leads to a thicker batter, but it has just a lovely flavor. And then we're gonna add in a cup of blueberries. You could use fresh or frozen. I had a lot of blueberries this week, and so we're gonna use fresh ones. Sometimes my kids go through a stage and they'll eat a whole bunch of blueberries, and then I'll buy like, you know, 4 containers of them, and then they'll only eat like 1 package. And I'm like, oh. It's the same with bananas. One week they eat all the bananas, next week they eat none of the bananas. Okay, so, and we just stirred it a few times to incorporate them. Again, you don't want to over stir them. And now we got our muffin tin. And I'm gonna use some foil muffin liners because I really like foil ones. I think they cook a little bit better than the parchment, but I have no true evidence to that. I just my own personal preference. And just mixing up the colors here. There we go. And then we're gonna divide our batter out. I find using a metal spoon works a little bit better than using a big spatula. So I'm just gonna start by scooping it into each one, and then we'll go back over and make sure they're all fairly even as we go through. There we go. Beautiful. I love a good blueberry muffin, and just nothing new. We're gonna do a little streusel that we're gonna put over the top of them, which will be just add a nice little thing. We're gonna do a streusel using like granulated sugar, white sugar, which is a little bit more of a lighter streusel than one using brown sugar, but it pairs really well with blueberry muffins or lemon poppy seed muffins. You know, surprising how many different types of streusels you can make out there. But we're just gonna do a basic one using some flour, butter, and sugar. Go there. Perfect. And fill this guy up. And then I'm just gonna come over and add just a little bit more into each one. Perfect. And the trick is when you're making your muffins is you want to try to make sure each one is about equally filled so that you don't have some muffins cooking better than others. If you have 2 muffin trays, you can, if you take out the middle ones and put them in another one, so you have all of yours on an outside edge, they'll all rise up to about the same side. I say the middle ones of your muffin tray tend to take a little bit longer to bake, so you could either put a little bit less in them and then they'll bake up at around the same time as the other ones, or you could just use a second tray, put them in there. I think I've got a little bit more here. Getting all these blueberries out and making sure we've got some in every single one because the blueberries are the star of the show in these muffins. Beautiful. Okay. I think they're all almost evenly filled, so they'll have a nice dome on them. Perfect. Let me give my hands a quick wash. And then we're going to make our streusel. And we're just making a little bit. So I have 2 tablespoons of butter here that is melted. You can use softened butter as well. And then we're gonna use about 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar and 2 tablespoons of flour. So just think 2, 2, and 2. So 1, 2, and then we're gonna do the flour. 1, 2. And then with this, I'm just going to mix it with my finger because we are going to literally be picking it up and scooping it onto our muffins. So it works best to kind of put it on with your fingers instead of trying to scoop it on with a spoon. I'm gonna put maybe a little bit more flour in here. You want it to have a nice crumbly texture. And my butter was a bit more melted and hot still. There we go. So I added just a little bit more till we have a nice little crumbly texture. We're just gonna put this over the tops of our blueberry muffin. A little bit of streusel goes a long way. Also with streusel, your muffins take a little bit longer to cook. So if you choose to omit the streusel topping, they'll cook a little bit faster. But the streusel topping is where it's at. It's delicious. We're gonna just break it up. And we're almost done. And then we can pop these in the oven. I have my oven preheated to 375 degrees. And these take about 20 minutes around that to cook. Sometimes, you know, they're done a little bit sooner, depending if you want to stretch the dough and make them a little smaller, they'll be done quicker. But I just like having a nice big, there we go. So we've got our beautiful streusel on it. I'm gonna do give my hands a quick wash, and then we'll pop these in the oven. Okay, so again, I have my oven preheated to 375 degrees, and these will be for our sourdough discard blueberry muffins. And then we are going to make a lovely kind of a pizza melt and a pesto melt. So I'm gonna put my timer on for 19 minutes, so I will know to come right back here. And then we're gonna prep our sandwiches, and then we've gotta feed our starter because we just took out some. And you always wanna, when you take out, you always wanna replace it with some. So tonight we're gonna be baking up our new loaves. So we're almost down to getting to the ends of it. This was our spinach feta we made the other day, and this is our traditional sourdough. Tonight we'll be baking up another traditional sourdough, as well as a sun-dried tomato and basil. Right now I have those in the fridge proofing, like doing their cold, like their bulk ferment in the fridge, which gives a nice spring in your dough when you're baking. Okay, now I'm gonna cut this one. I love the spinach feta one. I've been having every single day a slice for breakfast. I just pop it in the toaster, and then I spread a little butter on it, and it's just so good.
You have a question? How'd you learn to cook all this different stuff?
You know what? Just trial and error and practice through times. Anytime I saw something I wanted, I was like, well, I can make that. And you know, you practice. And then you get, like, whenever I get a new recipe or something new, I'm pretty good at understanding recipes, just because when you've cooked for so long, you understand, like, the process, and you're like, oh, okay, that's not hard. These work well. Or I'll adapt a recipe to the way that I like it, you know, like use butter instead of oil or milk instead of water. Just gives you a nicer baked good. I've been cooking for, gosh, since I was 13 years old. So I've been doing it a long time. That's what, 30 or 24 years now. So you get better with time and you get practice. In the beginning, I was not nearly as good of a cook as I am now. Okay, I'm spreading a little bit of butter on each on one side of each slice of bread. This is what's going to be face down on our skillet. And the reason I only do it on one side is because that's all. You don't need to do it because the inside is going to have your yummy, delicious cheese and your toppings. So we'll put face down. And I just like to assemble them on my skillet. My skillet's not turned on yet. But I love these skillets for doing grilled cheeses because you can just slide right under instead of having to like scoop up. Okay, we're gonna put on a little bit for my husband who's doing a pizza melt one. I'm gonna use a little bit of marinara sauce, and then for me, I'm gonna use a little bit of pesto.
Yeah, you have a question? Do you ever make beef and cabbage soup, and do you have a good recipe?
I do. I have made beef and cabbage soup, so I'll have to do that sometime for, I do. I actually really love beef and cabbage soup. Unfortunately, my kids don't really care for cabbage, nor does my husband. But I will have to make that for it. My parents love it and I love it, so maybe I'll make that for a lunch one day. And then my parents can have the rest because I do love a good beefy, like a beef and vegetable with the cabbage soup. It's really good. So maybe I'll have to get that soon. Okay, so we've got my marinara on this one, and then I'm gonna do some pesto on mine, and I'm doing mine on the spinach feta because it's so good. And a nice thin layer. You don't need too much because pesto's got a good kick to it. Okay, for my husband's, we are going to use some mozzarella. So not fresh. If I had fresh, that would be even better. But we use what we have. We're gonna do a nice layer on his. Now the trick with it is you wanna make sure your cheese does not overflow your bread, otherwise it will just melt right onto your skillet. So just get a little creative with how you tear it and kind of make it like one of those mosaics. So we've got our mozzarella, and then I'm gonna be doing a half mozzarella and half havarti because I love havarti cheese. And it has a really good melting point, which makes it perfect for grilled cheeses. Yeah, that's the trick is when you're making a grilled cheese, you got to think about what cheeses melt well, and then they'll work great on it. And when I say melt well, what cheeses melt at lower temperatures than other cheeses. So Parmesan, while it's delicious, is not a great one to use in grilled cheeses because it takes forever for it to melt because it's such a dry cheese. Okay, for my husband, we're gonna put a little bit of pepperoni on his for it. I'm not the biggest fan of pepperoni, so I'll be skipping on it. I told you I'm a spice wimp. I really can't handle much spice, and I feel like pepperoni is too spicy sometimes. So we'll put this on there, a thin layer. The trick is when you're doing a grilled cheese and you're adding meat to it, you don't want to put too much meat that it prevents the cheese from melting because the meat is cold and it like won't let your cheese melt. It keeps it nice and cold. So we do a thin layer of it, and then we'll do the cheese. If you want to have a really hearty, meaty sandwich, then you either want to heat up your meat in like a frying pan first, or you could do your grilled cheeses in the oven. I find that works well where you do them open face and then you fold them together. When I'm making grilled cheeses for a large amount of people, like if we're doing it for our family dinner for all 9 of us, I will actually do it in the oven on my air fryer setting. And I can whip out like 15 grilled cheeses at a time in like less than 10 minutes. So here is my husband. He's got it. And then we're gonna do another layer of marinara. Not super thick, just nice and thin to kind of give you that little kind of pizza flavor to it. You know, the mozzarella and the marinara. And then we're gonna do a layer of havarti on mine. If you've never had havarti before, it is like a really creamy, mild cheese. It really picks up the flavor with anything you eat. So like you'll taste, the pesto will really bring it out on here, but it melts really easy and I love it. Okay, and then I'm just gonna do another thin layer of pesto on here. And for pestos, I do actually have preferred, I love Kirkland's, which is Costco's brand of pesto, and then Rana's has a really good pesto that I like. There are some I do not like Buitoni's. I feel like they put too much pine nuts in it and has a weird aftertaste. Okay, I'm gonna turn my skillet onto about a 7, and we're gonna let it cook up, and then I'll turn it down up there. While we are letting this cook up, we need to feed our sourdough starters. Let me take this out of the way. So every time I use my sourdough discard, I try to feed it so that I'm always replenishing what I have. So we're gonna feed it with unbleached flour. So I have unbleached, it doesn't matter whether it's bread flour or all-purpose. When making the bread, you wanna use bread flour, but I like to use just all-purpose for feeding it because bread flour is a lot more expensive. So I'm gonna use 10 tablespoons in each one. And again, unbleached flour. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I've got 10 in there. And the reason why I do it in 10 is it's because 1 tablespoon is equal to 15 milliliters. And so 10 tablespoons is 150 milliliters. And it's just really easy to do the math that way of how much water I need to add in. 4, 5, 6. And then we'll add our water in there. And then I use just tablespoons. Once you've got your starter going, you don't need to be as exact. Like in the beginning, I use my scale and I do half and half, but as I'm just feeding it, sourdough is a lot more forgiving. So I put in 10 in each one, so now I need to add 150 milliliters of water to each one. And I got, these cups are like the best. They came with my little plastic tubs, but they have literally the cups, the ounces, and the milliliters. So it's really nice when you're trying to do, if you're using like European recipes. In cooking, they will use just milliliters and grams. And that way you can do, especially with baking. I find like, sourdough breads, I always use my scale because with baking, if it's not a cookie, like if you're making cakes or even like a macaroon, you have to be really exact with your measurements because it can vary. Like we use in the United States, we use the cup system, and sometimes your cup can weigh almost 50 grams more than another cup, just depending if there's an air pocket or if you press down on the flour at all. So using like measurements like the grams is a lot more accurate, and with a lot of baking, you have to be really accurate. There we go. Got this guy stirred up, and then I'm gonna get my thin one because my water's up to the top. These are great thin spatulas for using to mix your discard up because you can use a smaller jar if you wanted. I always have 2 jars going because I am constantly like making stuff with it. So like yesterday we prepped our bread for it, and if I wanted to, I could make bread again because all you have to do is feed your starter 6 to 8 hours before you start making a loaf of bread. So I could make a loaf of bread tonight if I wanted to. You just want to make sure you use like a nice bubbly starter. There we go. Give it a nice stir, and look, these guys are ready to continue their fermentation process. And I think my grilled cheeses are ready for their first flip. Okay, now the first flip is just for warming up the bread and melting the butter. Our second, we cook them on both sides. The second one is for getting that nice golden crust because a grilled cheese has to have a nice crispy golden brown crust. Okay, let me put my cheesecloth on my starters ready to ferment. If you're new to sourdough or you're thinking about trying to start sourdough, for just like ease, go online and buy one of those sourdough starter kits. They cost like 50 bucks on Amazon or whatnot, but they have the jar and the cheesecloth and the spatula and the dough whisk, everything you could need, and they just make it so much easier. You'll thank me afterwards. So I'll put those over there because you can, like, I mean, who actually has cheesecloth laying around their house? Nobody does. Okay, we're gonna cut up some cantaloupe to have with our lunch today. So we've got our lovely grilled cheeses. I can hear them sizzling. Let's see if they're ready for their next flip. Just about. I think we're ready to start the melting and the golding stage. Okay, Now our goal on these next 2 flips is to get our nice golden color. Okay, let me grab our knife. And a bowl. I'm a big proponent of literally buying your fruit whole and then cutting it yourself and chopping it up at home, because it saves you so much more money than having to buy it at the store pre-cut. Now, cantaloupe isn't that big of a price change, but what is it, like pineapple? I can buy a full pineapple for like $3, like $2.99 at the store. But if I want to buy that same amount of pineapple cut up, it's like 10 to 15 bucks. So it's a great way. It's really not that hard to chop up your own fruit, and it only takes like 5 minutes. It really doesn't take much time. So our cantaloupes, you just cut them in half. I cut them in half the long way instead of like the short squat way, and then you just scrape it out. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to slice it as if they were watermelon slices. And perfect. And then I'm just going to go down and make what our individual chunks are going to be. When you do this, it allows your melon to lay flat like this, which makes it much easier to then take your knife through and just cut off the back. So it's just super easy to cut them off in that way. Let's check to see how our grilled cheese is getting nice and golden. Oh, beautiful. Look at this. That nice brown crust on there. This one needs a little bit. We're going to give them each about 1 minute longer, but you see how we're getting that rich, beautiful golden crust, which we want. And then our muffins should be done soon. Cut these through. But I feel like that is one thing grocery stores do. It's like highway robbery, how much of an upcharge they charge you for them to cut up their produce for you. And if you think about it, it's not like they're paying somebody that much extra to do it. They already have their like employees there and prepping stuff. So it's like they really make, I think, a huge profit on like pre-cut fruits for you guys. And I always like to just do it myself because it's just cheaper. And I find like when you buy pineapple at the store, you never know whether you're going to get a good one in those containers or not. And so I like when I buy them, I'll have them sit on my counter for a couple of days before they I cut them up, because they're typically underripe when you first buy them. Okay, let's get these guys going. Look at that perfect golden brown crust on here. Excellent. I'm going to rotate because this side gets a little bit hotter. And we're going to finish that up. Let's check. Okay, we got 2 minutes left on our muffins and then they're done. So by the time we have our cantaloupe cut up and our grilled cheeses are ready, our muffins will be ready too. Okay, cut these through. And I will say, if you're new to like doing this and you're new to using knives, like my husband, he's the novice when he comes to using knife. He's always like more like scared to cutting. He's afraid to cut himself. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get, and you'll realize that you're actually not going to cut yourself all that often. Not to say you won't, because I have cut myself in the kitchen plenty of times before. But as long as you're using a nice sharp knife, you won't, and you're just careful about your finger placement, you'll be fine. I find most people, if they cut themselves in the kitchen, it's like they're cutting a tomato or an onion and their knife is not sharp enough, so it slips. And if you ever find your knife like catching on your food, you just need to sharpen it up with your honing steel. Most knife sets come with a honing steel, which just kind of looks like a nice big sword. But it's fairly easy to show you. I can probably show you guys that in just a second, what it looks like to sharpen up a knife, because it is an important skill, because your knives don't stay sharp forever, and once they go dull, they're kind of worthless until you sharpen them right back up. Like whenever I go to my parents' house, all of their knives are dull. And I feel like I'm like, okay, let's sharpen these up for you guys. And then I'll be back and they'll be dull again. Okay, let's see how beautiful. Got a nice golden crust on here. Let's see, perfect. So I'm gonna turn this off. We're gonna let it sit and let the residual heat cook those up. I've got 3 more slices of cantaloupe to cut up. This will be great because we'll have this with lunch and then we'll have it with our dinner tonight when my kids get home. And perfect. But you see how it took me maybe 5 minutes to cut up this cantaloupe, but in the long run it probably saved me $6, maybe more, because this cantaloupe cost me I think $2.75 from the store today, so pretty cheap. But if I were to buy this container, that would easily be $10. Okay, so there's our cantaloupe all cut up.
You have a question? How many kids do you have?
I have 5 kids. So, let's go check it out. So we go through a lot of fruit and food. And so 1 cantaloupe will last us 1 meal. But that's why I'm like, oh, I don't want to spend $10 a pop. Look at our beautiful muffins. I'm going to give them a tap. They're nice and firm, beautiful. They're ready to come out. I always touch, if your muffin squishes in when you touch it, that means it needs to cook a little bit longer. So here are our beautiful blueberry muffins. Lovely. Put them right over here on our stove. They're nice and ready. You know, if you wanted to brush them with a little bit of milk, you could get a golden top on it. But the worst thing is an overcooked muffin. So these, you can tell, they're perfect. They're not pushing down. They're nice and firm. If you cook them any longer, they would get dry. So you want a nice, for blueberry, because there is no brown sugar or anything to darken it up, you want a nice light color, and then it is perfect. Okay, guys, we've got our pizza melts, we've got our blueberries and everything. Let's plate up lunch. Beautiful. So here is where it's at. We've got our beautiful, so you've got a nice golden crust on both sides. Beautiful. And then here is our other one, and we're now going to chop it up. So this one was our pizza melt with the pepperoni and the mozzarella and the tomato. And this one was our pesto and havarti and mozzarella on spinach feta. So this guy is what I will be having for lunch today. And you see that nice, that's the havarti and the mozzarella in there. Oh, it's delicious. And then we have my husband. I can cut it through. His is less exciting. It's like a pepperoni pizza on sourdough. Still good. Still, you have that beautiful stretchy cheese, perfect golden crusts. And then, let's see. I think these should be cool enough for me to touch. But here is, see if I can, ooh, it's very hot, so I'm gonna pop it on the muffin. But I'll bring it up nice and close. This is our beautiful blueberry muffins. Well, guys, thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Feel free to send us a message or comment if you have any cooking questions. Again, thank you for joining us. We made our pizza melts, our sourdough discard blueberry muffins, and we cut up some fresh cantaloupe. Okay, guys, thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe.